Okay, what if I told you that for years there was a rule that basically said if you were accused of a serious crime, you could be arrested automatically, no questions asked? Well, today we're going to dive into a single court case that completely flipped that script. I mean, this thing redefined the entire balance between police power and your personal freedom, right here in India. So let's just get right to it with a question. Imagine you're named in a police complaint for a serious crime, what they call a cognizable offense. Do the police have to arrest you right then and there? For a very long time, the answer was, frankly, a pretty terrifying yes. But, and this is a big but, that's not how it works anymore. And the story behind that change, it's absolutely fascinating. All right, so where did this whole idea of automatic arrest even come from? Well, it all started with a legal decision that, let's be honest, created a massive problem for one of our most fundamental rights, the right to personal liberty. Yeah, the case that really kicked this whole thing off was called Dr. Vinod Narain. What the court said back then was pretty simple. If a first information report, an FIR, suggests a serious crime has happened, then an arrest wasn't just an option. It was seen as necessary. It was pretty much the only way they thought they could guarantee someone would show up for trial. So arrest became the default setting, the first thing that happened, not the absolute last resort it should be. And this really sets up the central battle of ideas, doesn't it? On one hand, you have the Dr. Vinod Narain rule. Serious accusation equals necessary arrest. Simple as that. But then, on the other hand, this powerful new idea started to take shape in a case called Amarawati. And its argument was the complete opposite. Arrest is not mandatory. It's a choice, a power the police have to use wisely. But here's the thing. This wasn't just some legal squabble between two court cases. No, this went way deeper. This was a direct conflict with the highest law in the entire country, the Constitution of India itself. So to really get why this is such a big deal, you gotta understand how our laws are stacked up. Think of it like a pyramid. Right at the very top, the peak, is the Constitution. It's the supreme law. End of story. Everything else, all the other laws like the Criminal Procedure Code that the police follow, they all sit below it. And the number one rule is, if there's ever a fight between a regular law and a constitutional right, the Constitution wins, every single time. And that brings us to the absolute heart of this whole thing. Article 21. This is the big one. It's what guarantees your right to life and personal liberty. Now, it says the government can take away your liberty, but only if it follows a procedure established by law. And the courts have been super clear on this. That procedure can't just be some random rule. It has to be just, fair, and reasonable. And, well, an automatic arrest? That just doesn't sound very fair or reasonable, does it? So, the stage is set for a major legal showdown. And this is where a huge 7-judge full bench of the Allahabad High Court steps onto the scene. They were there to settle this fight once and for all, and they did it with a judgment that we now know as the Amarawati judgment. And you won't believe this, but the entire case, the whole argument, hinged on a single 3-letter word. Seriously. In the Criminal Procedure Code, Section 41 says a police officer may arrest someone. The court's logic was just brilliant in its simplicity. They said, look, the lawmakers chose the word may for a reason. May means you have a choice. It's not must or shall, which would mean you have to do it. It's may. And just like that, with that simple piece of logic, the court handed down its landmark ruling. They officially threw out the old Dr. Vinod Narain precedent. The age of automatic arrest was done. The court made it crystal clear. Arresting someone is a choice, a discretionary power. It's a serious decision that a police officer has to make, not just some automatic reflex. But wait, they didn't just stop there. The court knew it wasn't enough to just change the rule, so they went even further. They laid out a whole new set of clear guidelines for police and for the lower courts to follow. This wasn't just a tweak. It was a fundamental shift in how the justice system was supposed to work. From now on, police had to actually stop and think before making an arrest. They were given a new checklist of questions. Things like, okay, is this complaint even genuine? Is arresting this person really necessary to investigate the crime? And maybe most importantly, what kind of irreparable damage is this arrest going to cause to this person's life and their reputation? The whole focus shifted from just assuming an arrest is needed to having to justify it. And this new way of thinking reached the courts too. The judgment recognized that even spending a short time in jail can cause huge harm, so it gave a new direction to magistrates. You need to decide on bail applications the very same day they're filed. No more letting people sit in a cell for days just waiting for a hearing. If there was gonna be a delay, the judge had to write down a very good reason why. I mean, this was a massive leap forward for getting people speedy justice. Okay, so this was a huge, powerful ruling from a high court. But how does something like that become the law for the whole country? Well, that's where the Supreme Court of India enters the picture, ready to give it the final official stamp of approval. So let's trace its journey. It all kicks off in 2004, when the Amarawati judgment is delivered. The High Court immediately sends out circulars telling all its judges to follow the new rules. But the real clincher, the moment that changed everything, came 5 years later, in 2009, during a completely different case called Kamlendra Pratap Singh, the estate of UP. And in that case, the Supreme Court took a long, hard look at the Amarawati judgment, and they approved the whole thing. This was absolutely monumental. You have to understand, when the Supreme Court says something is the law, that's it. It becomes binding on every single court, every police force, every government official across all of India. The Amarawati principles were no longer just a high court ruling. They were now the undisputed law of the land. So when you step back and look at the big picture, what's the lasting impact of this one case? Well, it's a legacy that really strengthens the very foundation of our personal liberty here in India. And at the end of the day, this is why this case really matters to you. It's your protection against being arrested unfairly just because someone filed a complaint. It creates that crucial balance, right? So the police can do their job and investigate crime, but without stomping all over your constitutional rights. It means if you are arrested, you have a better chance at getting justice quickly. But maybe the most important thing it does is hammer home this core belief of a free society. Your freedom is incredibly precious, and taking it away should always, always be the last resort, never the first step. So yeah, the Amarawati case set a really powerful standard, at least on paper. But it leaves us all with one last and maybe the most important question. How do we make sure that these amazing principles of fairness, of police discretion, of liberty aren't just words sitting in a law book? How do we make sure they're the reality out on the street for everyone every single day?